Hey, always freaks me out that this is slightly behind and I'm watching myself in a parallel universe. Is this working on YouTube? I don't know. Is this working on LinkedIn? Oh wow, that appears in your profile page. Okay, that's really strange. All right, so what did I do wrong last time? I didn't keep an eye on the chat. So, okay. Where are we? What are we going to be talking about today? So I've got my TikToks where I'm going to be looking at stuff that I've posted over the past month. I haven't done one of these for nearly a month now. So I'm going to go through some of the stuff on the TikTok. I'm going to be looking at the chats, so feel free to chime in because I'm hoping some of you would have got some notifications to bring you into the stream. And I'm also shook because I had a chat earlier with somebody that I spent some time over the month talking to about MVPs, and one of the conversations I had with them today has got me really sorry, it's distracting because I can see my lagging parallel universe version of me over there. It's a bit much. So yeah, I've been talking to them about MVPs, and I think I've come up with a massive realization, which I'm going to talk about later. So the no, actually, let's talk about that now. So I've got my first clinic tomorrow. So online, that's going to be done over. I've now realised I don't know how I'm going to be doing that over. I want to be doing that over Teams, but that means I need to be able to get people in. So I'm just going to have to move my preview off because it's really distracting. Oh my goodness. Hey, you know what? We'll get there. So I wonder if I can actually slow that down. No, why am I doing this now? There's a classic ADHD style geek getting distracted. So I put a new video up on YouTube today. So I'm actually really enjoying doing the kind of like the ones that are about 7 or 8 minutes long. Seems to be a more natural length for me, and I think I'm getting the pacing a bit better. So please do subscribe if you like the stuff and you like the stuff I do on YouTube. But where I've been, the post I put up today was looking at this constant battle that I've been having about your MVP has to be a real piece of software. And there's a lot of people out there who are telling you that your MVP does not have to be a real piece of software. And I am very much wondering why that is. So I think part of it is that there are a lot of people out there that are trying to sell you services, and it's a little bit easier for them to sell you those services if you don't already have an MVP. So that's perhaps a little bit cynical, but I've seen it done, and I think that's a lot to do with it. Another part to do with it is the fact that it's really expensive, right? In order to build an MVP, you are going to have to go and pay a professional software developer to do that, and the price of that is going to cost you multiple tens of thousands of pounds, probably low end 50,000, high end 75,000. And that the real argument comes into, where does that come in the flow? Like, do you need to have that money in order to get the investment in order for you to build your proper business? So the way that things are pitched at the minute, which I think is bizarro and wrong, is that people will say to you that you don't need to build an MVP. You can basically prove enough of your model, and then you can go away and get the money in order to build your MVP. If I were investing in a technology business, I would not touch that with a barge pole. For me, in order to invest in a technology business, I have to see that they know how to solve the core problem that they're solving. And as a technology business, that core problem has to be that somebody has to be able to log in and use the products that you think you can sell, right? So I'm going to do a little bit of a history lesson, because where I've been socializing the video that I put up today, people have been coming back to me consistently with the same point, which is, no, Matt, that's too heavy. That's too much for an MVP. And you should be able to do less than that in order to attract some money into the business to build your MVP. Where I think that this is really wrong is that there has been if you think about a 20-year period between 2002 and 2022, 2023, so now, basically, it used to be the case that developers never, ever, ever spoke to customers. That the whole idea that customers knew what they wanted out of their software was this aberrant weirdness. And the reason, and I think to an extent, it's going to be difficult for me to say that's legitimate. I think to an extent that is a legitimate thing to say, for the reason that the computers we use way less. And realistically, it wasn't the case that every user that you met was an expert in how to use software. And nowadays everybody is, because everyone spends half their lives using a pocket-based supercomputer they carry around in the pocket, plugged in to the whole of human knowledge, right? Which is what we do now. But if you go back to the 1990s or even the early 2000s, that wasn't necessarily the case. So there was more of an argument, I think it's a weak argument, to be honest, that you could argue that users didn't know what they were going to do, and so didn't know what they wanted, and so it was legitimate for software teams to say, we've been tasked with building this software, we're going to go away and do that for 12, 18, 24 months in a basement, not talk to anybody. But what would happen is that they would emerge from their basement, and what they had built would be crap, and it would not work. And effectively, you would have burnt however many hundreds of thousands of pounds worth of investment that was in building a product that didn't match. So along comes Eric Ries in 2012, who wrote a book called The Lean Startup. So one of the key principles of the Lean Startup, which is the one that we all think about today, is the minimum viable product, or the MVP. And the reason, the big shift for the MVP was that it was supposed to be experimental. So breaking that away from, is this kind of like an agile software development process, or is this anything else? The point was, with the MVP, was that you were supposed to ask the customer what it was, whether what you were doing was aligning with what they wanted, right? So it was literally a case of, rather than never talking to the user, you would go and talk to the user. This is sort of was transformative, right? This was an absolutely huge thing. Actually, one of the things I wanted to do before this, which I will go and ask ChatGPT to do for me, was what else was in that book, which I want to talk about. ChatGPT, well, spool ahead if you're bored, but don't quit, because it ruins my retention rates. .com. Okay, let's go. So, well, I'll say in a sec. So where I think things have got distorted was that the point of the Lean Startup was that it was still real software. That the principle of the MVPs in the book were that you needed to test what was going on, right? And you needed to experiment, you needed to talk to customers. And that was really important, especially because at that point, we had then transmogrified our society into a world where most people spent half their lives on carrying around a digital supercomputer in their pocket. Because in 2007, that's when we started to see the launch of the iPhone was in 2007, and that's when we get kind of like this post-PC world where suddenly everybody has access to computers, right? So where anyway, the idea of the MVP was supposed to be a real piece of software, but it was that point as well that we started to think more about user experience. We started to then take user experience and turn that into customer experience. We started to listen more to the customer journey and the user journey. We started to be more appreciative of what the users wanted to do. But at the same time, we also saw in the workplace this big rise of shadow IT. So shadow IT is this quasi-rebellious streak that users have, that behaviors that users develop in a business or enterprise setting, which are a direct response to the fact that they are not getting the service that they want from their IT department. Right? I'm going to controversially say, if the IT department was more responsive, the organization was better either at delivering the tools users wanted or better at communicating why things were the way they were, we wouldn't see this problem with shadow IT. So shadow IT is things like I need to get this document off to work on my computer at home. God, this makes me feel a bit queasy even talking about it. I want to get this document off, so I'm going to download my list of customers in Excel, put it on Dropbox, and then I can sync that Dropbox at home, and now I've got that data at home for me to work on while the kids are in bed, and I've got some spare time, right? It's opening up a whole load of issues here. I mean, it's hyper awful in terms of cybersecurity, but Shadow IT was about it allows users to build the systems that they want to do when the organization is not doing that for them. What I think is happening is that at the current time, because people are so used to building, and the problem with Shadow IT, like a lot of problems with things that people build, oftentimes when you build something and you make something work, right, as an amateur, meaning someone who doesn't get paid to do that, like the literal definition between amateur and professionalism, which is one of the things I had on come up on my TikTok this week, or got a lot of traction on my TikTok. One of the problems that you have as a professional is when you look at these solutions that people build, you kind of have to accept that they work, right? That they are good enough solutions for what they want to do. They might be horrendous from like the discipline that you've been taught as a professional, but fundamentally they do work. What happens when you take a world where you've had a decade of people getting used to building their own Shadow IT solutions, and you have inaccessible information technology provision, right? So Shadow IT came about because the IT teams are not providing the systems that that users want to use to do their job. That's most of the truth. Some of the truth is that Shadow IT systems exist because the company is not good enough at explaining why they can't do it the way they are doing it. Anyway, let's just say that it is because Shadow IT exists because the IT teams are not adequately good enough at providing the tools people use. You can then take that into the world of MVP building, in that as a founder, as a non-technology founder, you need to produce a system that does something, right? You need to produce a piece of software, which is your MVP. But the resource to do that, your IT or software development team, is inaccessible to you. There are 1,000,001 reasons why, as a lay person, non-technology founder trying to build this, that would be the case. A lot of it is money. So a lot of it is that you simply do not have the £50,000 kicking around for you to experiment with this. Not any, and you don't want to be. You don't want to be experimenting with 50,000 quid. If you've got that money, you want to be spending that properly. However, what I think has happened is that the ideas that came out of the lean startup, where MVPs were very much about software development discipline, they were still being driven by an IT department, right? They were still being driven by a function within the business that could produce software. Now, 10 years later, we have a situation where the users who need to produce that software can't access their software, and they're coming up with Shadow IT style solutions to solve that. So rather than this is a situation where someone will go, I've got an MVP because I've got my free version of HubSpot, I've got Zapier, and I've got Google Docs. So when a customer when someone goes onto a website and signs up for my service, I put that in HubSpot, Zapier picks it up, and Zapier puts it in my Google Doc. And now I've got a system. And those kind of solutions are being presented as being MVPs, but they're not MVPs. They are a strung together prototypical example of what's going to do. And then you have this whole other people on the other side who are going, that good enough solution you've come up with is actually okay. It kind of works. You can proceed with that. You can go and get your money. We believe that will get you to where it wants to go to. So what's happening is that these are not proper information systems. Why is that important though? So that's a really good question. So those sorts of MVPs which are built using those Shadow IT solutions to build good enough things which are kind of strung together, and there is a lot of validity in doing that because you do need to test what your customer wants, right? The thing which is really toxic is going back to the pre-lean startup world. The pre-ideas are in that book, which is that you don't ask your users anymore. You have to ask your users what they're doing. And shadow IT solutions to MVPs kind of let you do that. What they don't let you do is they don't let you then you go and build a business. So if I were an investor who was being asked to invest in a business that was behaving in that way, I would not. So I would not invest in a technology business as an angel investor that didn't have an MVP that had been constructed by a software development team, right? So the challenge that you need, the kind of the challenge that you've got, I meant to do a post on this, I need to make a note on this, right? So there is a form of funding before angel investing which is called FF and F. And F, it used to stand, more officially stands for friends, families, and fools. As in, these are the people who are kind of putting money into your business based on who you are, as opposed to thinking rigorously about what, there's no due diligence there other than, they're a nice person and they seem to know what they're doing. So when you have your FF and F money, you then do some work in order to then go and fund you for being able to get the seed investment. Now, this is where there is another disconnect. I did mean to do a post on this, but I ended up in hospital, which is why I didn't do it. So most people, when they go and get seed, I need to explain what CDIS investment. CDIS or SEIS is an HMRC scheme which makes it very attractive for angel investors to put money into your business. The point of SEIS is that you are largely protected from losses. So there are, you're protected from losses, and you can also defray your income tax, right? So it's a really tax efficient way of getting money into a business. SEIS, the cap used to be £125,000, I think. It's now £250,000. Now, mysteriously, all the people who back when the cap was £125,000 used to go and raise SEIS at £125,000. When the cap goes up to £250,000, guess what? Everyone wants £250,000 now. Now, that could have been because the cap was artificially low and actually people were suffering. But where this kind of gets into a line, I remember now I did want to do a much longer post on this. The government obviously puts out research on how SEIS works. The weird thing about SEIS is that although everyone is saying we want to raise £250,000 for SEIS, which means that you need to get 5 angel investors throwing in £50,000 each, practically. And the idea is that you go, I want my 250 grand because I want to spend 125 on software and I want to spend 125 on business development. That's normally how you split it. Where there is a problem with that, HMG report 2023, is that, so if you look at the statistics of SEIS, which you can do just by Googling for SEIS HMG report 2023, the average amount of money raised again, just tap the cursor right key if you want to skip through this. Annoying. Basically, the sum that is raised is small. It's nothing like £250,000. The average amount of investment for SEIS is, this is disappointing, I can't find it now. Percentage distribution, geographic. It's only something like, this is good TV, as Alan Partridge would say. It's something like £60,000. Like it is nothing like what you would think companies are raising. They're not raising as much money. The numbers tell us that the amount raised is not what people think it's going to be raising, right? So I wonder, and also there's some oddities in this as well. Like realistically, most SEIS money goes at like 55%? Together, London and the South East get 67% of the total SEIS investment. And SEIS is the preeminent vehicle for it's a preeminent vehicle for raising angel capital for the sorts of businesses that we're talking about here. So 67% of those businesses are in London and the South East. And 45% of those are in software, basically. So and they're only raising like £60,000. So what's happening with the rest of it? I've gone completely off target and off tangent, haven't I? What realistically, you are going to have to raise the money to build your version 1 MVP through FF and F, and you might be able to get a small amount of angel investment in, like being able to get some angels who might put £20,000 in to top up an FF and F fund is enough. Right, that's it, is what do you do next? When you build an MVP on a shadow IT solution, so you're stringing together things like free HubSpot accounts and Zapier and Google Docs and Airtable and all those sorts of things, when it comes to do the proper product, you don't have anything. You don't have anything to build on, right? So the idea of an MVP is a proper information systems product, a proper computer system that you go and get some investment in because you are trying to grow faster than if you were growing by organic cash flow. So your MVP that you build initially, you should be able to go out there and get customers for that and bring cash into the business. And with that cash comes profit, and with that profit comes further investment and further features being built in to the solution, right? If you go to a software agency and you have that thing built properly and you find your £50,000, £60,000 of FF&F money and they build you a proper solution, on the assumption that solution works, your next stage, when you can attract a bit more money or you're starting to get some revenue in, is building on top of that. It has an accretive effect. If you happen to build your MVP on a shadow IT solution, you don't have anything, you're starting from scratch. That means that you're going, from my perspective as a technologist, you are going back to a risk point where you have nothing. If you come to me as an investor and you've successfully spent £50,000 and built an MVP and started to get some traction in your company, I know that you've done something, right? And unless there are some really critical, very unusual problems in the way you've solved that, I know the next stage is phase 2 and it's accretive. It's adding on, right? If you haven't done that and you just have a shadow IT solution, I don't know that you've done anything. And that was really the thrust of what I was trying to get across in this YouTube video today. It has to be a substantive piece of work in order for you to qualify. You have to de-risk and qualify your solution by doing a substantive piece of work. What comes after that investment, FF&F gets you to a version 1 MVP. What happens with the investment is you take that and you develop the version 2 version of your product, which is also kind of a minimum viable product as well. I don't want to throw away the baby with the bathwater and lose this kind of experimental stuff. I want to make sure that that's really still in there, because that's really important. So so I've spoken about this a long time and I probably need to change the topic. It is the case for me that I won't invest, and I won't suggest that anybody invest in a business where they haven't had their MVP 1 properly developed. Now, getting your MVP version 1 properly developed is another topic that obviously I do a lot of stuff about, which is more that I'm going to do the clinic about tomorrow, which is actually how do you engage an agency to build your product. The short version of this is that you kind of, and I'll change the topic in a minute, but you need to go into this knowing that agencies more often than not will screw up that project. Agencies are not designed to work with founders. There are all sorts of problems with the engagement, not least of all that founders are operating in experimental mode because they haven't found product market fit yet. You are looking to do work and run experiments to converge on product market fit. Agencies augment existing teams, right? They augment existing business models. They are where you go, we already have found product market fit and we already have a revenue stream, and we already have employees, and we already have a real business. We just now need to do some more bits because we want to start creating new ways in which we're delivering digital value, right? So agencies will traditionally screw you up. But if you want to know more about how to do agency stuff, Friday mornings at 10:30 are online, are where I do my clinics. So, what has really caught people's attention on TikTok this past month? So one that I did really recently was about NDAs. Like, just you might as well just stop getting people to sign NDAs. There is no value in them, really, because it's anyone who you want to work with who's a professional, which is interesting. Anyone that you want to work with is not going to disclose your information, right? They are not going to willingly go and spew your information out. We all have, anyone who's advising a business, no matter what the discipline is, we all kind of have that baseline comportment about not doing that. And if it's done by accident, what are you going to do about it? And it's kind of, as a very small business, you can't, you have this non-disclosure agreement, but you can't enforce that agreement because you're too small, right? If there is a breach of an NDA, how are you going to take somebody to court in order to get remedy for that breach? Like, are you going to fine £20,000 to go to the High Court and get an injunction to stop the outcome of whatever that breach is? You're not. And NDAs are a real pain, because people whose job it is to advise startups, every startup is like, we need you to sign an NDA, we need you to sign an NDA. And it's kind of like, well, I either need to read that and it's long and I don't really have time to do it, or I'm not going to read it, and what's the point? Now, the thing is as well, it's kind of like, it doesn't work as a qualification point either, because it's just because the advisor will sign the NDA doesn't mean they're not going to, like, an advisor who a bad advisor, a malignant advisor who had every intent of breaking your confidence would still sign the NDA, because they're already screwing you over. So why not screw you over some more by signing an NDA? Doesn't make any sense. Another thing that got a lot of traction this month, which I wasn't surprised about, was Fiverr. It was just a post about the fact that I have had so many bad experiences of outsourcing to Fiverr over the past couple of years. I have heard some rumours about why that might be, which I guess I can probably share. So there is a sort of a theory that there is sort of like another tier of people who can't get on Fiverr. So you're so basically you have people who are on Fiverr who have got these good accounts, who've built up that profile over the time, but there's also this other tier of people that can't get on Fiverr, and all that's happening is they're outsourcing to this really trashy collection of vendors. It's just, and that is partially why it's going downhill. I think some of it is also a tragedy of the commons, is that there's effectively too much of them now. Sorry, I need to see all that. That's great. Like, that's lovely. I don't think that was anything important. Fantastic. Another thing that got an awful lot of hits on TikTok was I basically said that if you are going to outsource your MVP to an agency, and with the caveat that it basically is incredibly difficult to do, so please follow my content or engage with me in however you want, and I kind of will help you do that. Because one of the problems that founders have is that they will go and get their FF&F money, and they will go and find an outsource agency to give that project to, and that agency will then end up losing all their money. And you don't hear about those people then, because all they do is they go, I got really wounded by that, but I'm going to have to go back to my old job. So you never see enough of a big enough audience of them come together to demonstrate the problem. Anyway, I was basically saying, if you must do that, you should always nearshore, and from the UK and most Western companies, nearshoring means outsourcing to Eastern Europe, right? So outsourcing software projects started in the 80s or 90s by offshoring to Asia, or specifically India, which is why there's such a big industry of software outsourcing agencies over in India. But what people found was that it was very difficult to get good results, and there are reasons why it's difficult to get good results, so I'm not going to go into on my channel. But what other people worked out was that actually we can see the cost benefit in doing this. We can see why people would want to do it, and we can see it's expensive in the UK. But actually, what we want to do is there a middle ground? And they, for whatever reason, Poland was chosen as the place to kind of start building this nearshore industry. It tends to work much better if you are a non-technology person finding an agency in Eastern Europe and giving the project to that agency, to a nearshore agency, tends to work all right. And it tends to be much sketchier if you go elsewhere. And I'm just going to leave it at that. But it was kind of like that got a lot of traction, but that's really key. Another thing that to pick up in terms of outsourcing as well is that, and I did a longer video on this, is people don't really think about when you go down the journey of outsourcing as a layperson, as a non-technology person who's not done it before, you very quickly realize that outsourcing to if you're based in the UK, outsourcing to the UK is pretty expensive compared to everywhere else. There's a couple of reasons for that. One of the reasons is that UK agencies tend to have a consultative approach. Now, consultancy these days is a little bit of a toxic term because people don't like consultants very much and don't like to consult with people. But the advantage of going to a UK agency is that they will look at what it is you're trying to do and will work hand in glove with you to make sure that what you're trying to do is sensible. So they have this consultative approach. Outside of the UK, and you can sort of read that as any Western country, right? So any kind of one in Western Europe or Canada or Canada, the US, Australia, New Zealand, Ireland, etc. Anything outside of that, they tend to be a staffing problem. So what outsource agencies exist to do is they exist to add resource to existing development teams. They have a staffing ethos, not a consultative ethos. So part of the reason why you're paying a premium to do it in the UK is because a percentage of what you're spending per hour with a developer, there is consultative oversight. And the consultative oversight will do really helpful things to you for you in that they will help you not waste so much money. So if you go to a decent UK outsourcer and say, I want to build X, and X is a really shitty idea, that outsourcer in the UK will tell you it's a really shitty idea and not let you do it. If you go to an outsourcer in Thailand, they will just take your money. And there's no shade about why they do that. It's because that's not the role that service exists to fill. It is a staffing problem. And you lose a lot of that. Another thing that is really well hidden as well is that if you're based in the UK and you engage a UK agency, if everything goes to custard, you can sue. You can take that UK agency to court quite easily because you're within the same jurisdiction. If you have an agency in Poland or anywhere else, that's not within the UK legal system, you will then struggle because you will be doing a cross-jurisdiction litigation, and you probably don't have the money to do that. It's going to be, can you imagine if you have never stepped foot in, I'm going to pick Thailand again, if you've never stepped foot in Thailand and you want to take your supplier in Thailand to court and you do all your applications over there and you have to go over there and physically go into a courtroom, how well do you think that is going to work? It's going to be unbelievably messy. You're going to have to find a lot of you've got no chance of doing that as litigant in person. You're going to have to find representation. You don't really understand what the system is going to do. A lot of these problems, actually this is another post that I should have done. A lot of these problems can be ameliorated by if you have a connection to those areas, right? So if you, for example, were born and raised in Mumbai for 35 years and then come over to the UK and want to start a technology business, you're going to find it easier to outsource back to India than if you were someone who doesn't have that kind of existing cultural link, right? So that is another thing to consider. And kind of looking at the broad brush stuff that I have to do in terms of my socials, that's kind of a subtlety that you can fudge it, but it doesn't really solve the jurisdictional problem unless, okay, well, let's say you were born in Mumbai and you went to law school and you were a practicing lawyer and you moved to the UK and you wanted to set up a technology business, so you outsource it to Mumbai and that project goes wrong and now you've got to fly back home in order to take that supplier to court as a litigant in person with someone with a law degree in the jurisdiction you're working in. That's probably all right. Right, you could probably do that, but generally speaking, I have to kind of shape this to to the way it is. What else has kind of landed well this month? Again, good TV. Yeah, another thing about software agencies, and it's kind of like, look, what I want to do in the new year is I want to set up a software agency that specifically helps MVPs, to founders to build MVPs, because I think a lot of that engagement is so wrong and so broken. And one of the reasons that I end up doing what I do for founders is that my background as a CTO is one of the things that I really enjoy is broken projects. One sec. So I've never been one of these people who likes to work with a blank sheet of paper. I've always found that quite boring. I like to find something that isn't working properly and make it work. So for me, the ideal project is one that people have spent a whole load of money on and it is stuck and it can't get out the door, and someone engages me and I come along and I get that out the door. Where startup businesses are really interesting to me is that everything is a problem, because nothing's been worked out and everything's being done in a really scrappy way and no one has enough money to do things properly. There are lots and lots of problems in that area, and that's one of the reasons why I really, really like working with founders. It's like going with that. It's so embarrassing. So talk amongst yourselves. Sorry. Okay, so another thing that I did post this week, because I had a conversation with my friend Wally about that. He hasn't joined us on live stream today, so sad. Is that getting paid is a feature, and one of the things that that founders kind of forget to do when they go and work with an agency is they forget that they need mechanisms within the software that actually let them collect the money that they should be earning from building the solution. Part of that is that you would think the agencies would kind of steer people around this, because it is such a common thing, and agencies are always looking out for new ways to get you to spend more money with them, because of course they are. The cost of acquisition to getting you in is really high. I was talking about the book. That's what I was talking about. Yeah, I'll come back to that. So you think you need to have solutions in there that enable you to ultimately to get paid. So anyway, next month I've got this book coming out, which is about which comes from this sort of work I was doing as an expert witness, which is around projects which are so broken that effectively the supplier and the customer and supplier end up in court. And I wanted to do a book which was about how do you help non-technology leadership teams within established SMEs run complex software projects or complex information system projects without ending up screwing up and ending up in court. And a lot of the stuff that I've ended up doing with startups has ended up being related to the work that we're doing in that book. And that's part of what the clinic is tomorrow, is to start helping founders more actively look at how you go around building that project. If you're interested in that book, let me know, and I'd happily send over some bits and pieces about that. Yeah, I don't think we're getting to sort of the we're getting to the sort of end there. Oh, this was another one. This was such a classic one that didn't fly, right? So basically, there is this rule which has existed since the beginning of the software development industry, which is that putting more developers on a project does not make it go faster. So if you have a project which is late, if you sit there and go, this project is late and it's got 2 developers working on it, if I put 4 developers on it or 6 developers on it, it's going to go faster. That doesn't work. So back in the 70s, there was an IBM engineer called Fred Brooks who wrote this book called Mythical Man Month. And it was a series of essays, most of which still stand up today. Like, some of them don't quite align. Most of them do. And the one that does is this Mythical Man Month. So the idea of Mythical Man Month is that 9 pregnant women can't make a baby in 1 month. Where the post got some traffic, but a lot of people in the comments were kind of getting it wrong. What happens when you add more people to a team is that the communication complexity ramps up exponentially. So which is why if you've got 2 people who are used to working with each other, you know what, that project might be late. You need to work out why that project is late and then stop the project, stop those factors from making the project late. But adding new people in doesn't help, because now those 2 people have to catch up whoever is added to the team, job 1, which is going to stop everything initially. And then when they are kind of up to speed with what's going on, you've then got greater reporting, greater oversight, greater complexity, more people. It basically doesn't help you. So that project that was going to land in 3 months and be 3 months late is still going to land in 3 months, but be 3 months late, but you would have spent 2x or 3x times the amount you spent before. So that was what I just wanted to say about that. Well, cool. And yeah, I think we can leave it there. No, it's been fantastic. Always good to do these live streams, and hopefully see you in the clinic tomorrow morning.